a 46-year-old man, Robert Bowers, shot 11 congregants in a temple called, I think it's the Tree of Life, in Pittsburgh, a conservative temple, conservative in terms of its Jewish denomination, not necessarily its politics. The dead ranged in age from mid-50s to mid-90s. I think a woman who was a Holocaust survivor, actually. And my understanding is it was Shabbat services, but also there may have been a bris at the time. 4 police officers also shot. The man was taken into custody. He had 21 guns registered in his name. He used an AR-15 style assault rifle and 3 handguns, according to authorities. He was loudly spewing murderous hatred and bigotry online, and as he went into the church, apparently said something to the effect of all Jews must die. The guy's social media accounts, particularly at gab.com, had all sorts of white nationalist memes. He claimed Donald Trump's he claimed Donald Trump was not a white nationalist, that he was a globalist, he claimed that Donald Trump was under the influence of Jews and was basically a figurehead, was not doing enough to stop the caravan that was coming of immigrants who represented an invasionary force that was driven by Jews.
That's right, Joyce. He was running for Paul Ryan's seat earlier this summer, and it's too dark to see exactly, but behind me, down this alley here, we do know that's where Ryan's house was here in Madison, and next to me you can still see a little bit of a local police presence here, but very quiet overall in this neighborhood after the FBI searched Ryan's home this afternoon. Jeremy Ryan's campaign ad this summer heavily focused on the legalization of medical marijuana and describes Ryan as someone who smokes weed, drinks alcohol, and curses, calling himself, quote, a regular person.
I'm pissed off. And you know what usually helps when I off? Cannabis.
On Wednesday, Milwaukee FBI agents arrested the 30-year-old in Black Earth, Wisconsin, then were seen here searching his home on the 300 block of Munn Road in Madison. They say Ryan tried buying a lethal dose of radioactive material online to kill an unnamed individual. Ryan was a very visible leader of the Act 10 protests in the Capitol in 2011 and was widely known as Segway Jeremy because of the Segway he was always riding. He tried suing the state of Wisconsin for $10 million, claiming he and other protesters were kept out of the Capitol. That case was dismissed in federal court. In 2014, Ryan was arrested on domestic abuse charges, and his campaign over the summer only garnered about 10% of the votes. He now faces a maximum sentence of life in prison for attempted possession of radioactive material with intent to cause death.
It's not me anymore. Oh, anymore. You thought that you were invincible, and you scratching out a superhero. Oh, you thought that I was just a door. That's all and no.
But radical Democrats want to turn back the clock. Or the rule of corrupt, power-hungry globalists. You know what a globalist is, right? You know what a globalist is. A globalist is a person that wants the globe to do well, frankly, not caring about our country so much. And you know what? We can't have that. You know, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist. National. Nothing. Use that word.
Those engaged in the political arena must stop treating political opponents as being morally defective. No one should carelessly compare political opponents to historical villains, which is done often. It's done all the time. It's got to stop. We should not mob people in public spaces or destroy public property. So again, the concern, and I think it's an understandable concern, is that someone is attempting to kill people, and he goes back to, don't mob people in public places. Don't spit on someone in a restaurant, don't scream at them at a Kroger, or whatever. That is what Donald Trump chose to talk about. He also said, don't compare people to historical villains. So he's saying, don't call people Nazis, even though there are multiple literal Nazis and neo-Nazis running as Republicans in the primaries and the general election in this cycle.
Everyone, this next song is about love and allergies.
I want to say a special
Look at me,
word
I don't
to young
understand
people
politics.
Who are here. I have been all over this country, and in my view, the young people of this country, your generation, is the most progressive generation in the history of America. You are leading this country in the fight against racism.
Against that.
In the fight against sexism.
Against that right there. That right there.
In the fight against homophobia.
That right there.
And in the fight against religious bigotry.
That right there. Straight up.
You understand, not just for yourselves, but for your kids and your grandchildren, that climate change has got to be combated, and we need to move to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. You know that.
Hey guys, today I went to the University of Nevada, Reno, UNR, to see Bernie Sanders. He was there stumping for Jackie Rosen, who was running to unseat Heller, who is a disgusting fucking scumbag. And he's a Trump acolyte sycophant, piece of shit. So I went, and my buddy Mac Esposito was there playing some bass, and there were fascists there. And I talk some shit because I want and like to do such things. And I'm going to show you the entire Bernie speech, which I think is fucking great. And but what I ultimately want to do with this video is I really want to kind of sort of examine the notion of what us anarcho-socialists and anarcho-syndicalists are regularly, and with, I think, very good reason, vehemently cautioned against and have been for some time, which is to get involved in electoral politics. Our current form of representative democracy, completely backed by a capitalist economy, is completely contrary to the things that we're striving for the world. And many socialists will argue that to get out and push voting and to bolster various Democratic or progressive candidates is to ultimately bolster this system that we are singularly devoted to completely reforming into something that's much more representative of every single person's needs across the globe. But I do feel that we currently have some very extenuating circumstances. We have a Republican who was running for office just recently who tried to get chemicals to murder somebody. Some white man in Kentucky first tried to walk into a well-known black church and couldn't get in, so instead he went and shot a black man in the back of the head, and then another random black woman, and shot them multiple times and murdered them. You know, we have a president, white man, who just declared himself a nationalist, which is something that he has much in common now, adding to the long list of things he has in common with cats like Mussolini and Hitler. And this white male, white nationalist president of ours is regularly energizing his base, who are a mass of astoundingly ignorant and arrogant in their ignorance, misinformed people who, for the most part, don't understand that they've bought into tried and true, 100% dyed-in-the-wool fascist ideals and rhetoric. And he is weaponizing these people into believing that every liberal and progressive, socialist, anarchist, everything is Antifa, and that this thing, this group Antifa, which isn't a group, it just means anti-fascism. So if you're against fascism, you're Antifa. But that they are violent terrorists who are out to destroy the world, and are this horrible, dire, immediate existential threat. So they go, what do? We gotta go, murder people and stuff. And so I think that it's worth, at the very least, examining the notion. I'm not fully confident. I have been lending some support to some local candidates who I think are really fucking down for labor and for good causes and stuff. And so I want to examine this notion. I'm an anarcho-socialist. Am I doing the wrong thing? And I think the best way to examine this is to check in with Errico Malatesta. He's had much to say, and that I think is very astute, and in many ways very scathing of anyone who's even entertaining notions like ours. So we're going to take a look at Bernie's speech and a bunch of what went on at the rally today, and we're also going to be taking a very close look at what Errico Malatesta thinks of my shenanigans. But first, this is another local candidate who's from Reno. I just think she had some fucking fantastic things to say. So let's check it out, and then we'll come back, and then we'll get into Bernie, and then we'll hang out with Errico.
As was mentioned, I'm your current Assembly member for District 24, which is right here at the UNR campus and the main part of downtown. And it's very bittersweet for me today because I chose not to run again. So I only have 12 days left as your Assemblywoman. However, I have some excellent news. We have my replacement here, actually. Yes. The way that the Nevada law works is that the winner of the primary, if there's only one party running, is actually sent to the general election ballot with no opposition. So we know that my replacement in Assembly District 24 is one that we will be in good hands with. Her name is Sarah Peters. I am thrilled that Sarah will be representing me and my family. To tell you a little bit about her, the best part is she is a graduate of this university. As a scientist.
So one of my first speeches, I introduced myself as the blue-haired engineer. I'm now a purple-haired engineer. Yes, thank you. Graduate from UNR, and so happy to be representing this district, one of the most progressive districts in the state of Nevada, one of the most diverse districts in the state of Nevada, and a district that I've called home for most of my life. I love Nevada, and I think we have so much to offer the people and the communities throughout our state. Although I grew up in Reno, I have roots in rural Nevada, and it's so important to me, especially within the environmental field, that we protect our rural communities and the resources that they have on hand. I'm not a one-issue candidate. I can tell you that my background and experience in environmental issues is where I am at home and where I feel confident in making good protective laws for this state, and I'm looking forward to that. But I am also a progressive candidate. We need to talk about LGBTQ rights, women's rights, and civil rights still. I'm excited this year to be one of the candidates who will make our legislature the first majority female legislature in the country. And I'm following in good shoes. Amber has left a great foundation, and I'm excited to come in after her and to pursue some of the same issues that she has tried to pursue in her tenure at the legislature. But I'm also excited to pursue more. Please reach out to me. If you have issues that come up to you, my information is out there. I'm available to talk to you. If you have questions about other candidates and how to reach out to them, please let me know. One of the best parts about Nevada is how accessible our candidates are, that they live in our communities, that they show up at these events, that they come, hi friends, that they come out and speak with you. I was wandering around earlier and I got to see so many people who I know from different venues that I've been to throughout this last year, but even beyond that, you know, running into you at Rayleigh's and Walmart, or not Walmart, I shop at Walmart, sorry, Costco, probably more like Costco. Anyways, I'm so excited that this is the platform that we're standing on today, that Jackie Rosen, Clint Cobley, that Kate Marshall will all be here to speak with us, in addition to the support of Bernie Sanders and his progressive message for us. It's exciting to have Nevada be in such a spotlight, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. My last bit, and I think it's going to be pretty much the solid message for today, is go out and vote. I showed up to do my job. I showed up as a candidate. I showed up to do my job. And it's our turn, all of our turns, to show up and vote for the issues that matter to us, for the candidates that matter, that align with the issues that matter to us, and to support our communities today and for the future generations and beyond. Thank you so much for showing up today. I really appreciate seeing all of your faces. And I'm so excited to be representing you in the state legislature.
Thank you, Sarah. I've always said that the Nevada legislature needs two things. First is more women. Second is more women with purple hair. Am I right?
I am here today to end one-party rule in Washington. I am here today to stand up to a president who wants tax breaks for billionaires, but is prepared to throw 32 million Americans off the health insurance that they have. I am here today because we need members of the Senate who will tell Donald Trump that climate change is real and that we are going to save this planet by transforming our energy system in America. And I'm especially happy to be here on campus, and I want to tell you why that's so. Right now in America, as Jackie indicated, we have a corrupt political system.
Damn right.
We have a government in Washington and its state capitals all over America that do not represent the middle class or working families, but represent the top 1% and wealthy campaign contributors.
Is that why you gave your nomination to Hillary?
We have a situation where the Koch brothers and a handful of other billionaires are right now, as
you were my
we
guy
speak,
until you sold out.
flooding airwaves in Nevada and all over this country with ugly 30-second ads because they want the United States government to protect their interests, not the needs of working families. And today we say to the 1% and to the billionaires that their greed has got to end, and that we need a government that represents all of us, not just the few. That's what this campaign is about. Now, the Republicans win elections when working people don't vote and when billionaires buy those elections. 4 years ago, in 2014, we had nationally the lowest voter turnout since World War II. A whole lot of working people and lower income people didn't vote. A whole lot of people of color did not vote. And a whole lot of young people did not vote. Our job in 2018 is to have the highest midterm voting. And you can do that. You can do that as soon as we're finished right here by marching over to the Joe and casting your ballot.
Hi, I'm incredibly ignorant and don't understand anything. That's what that is.
I want to say a special
Look at me,
word
I
to
don't
young
understand
people
politics.
Who are here. I have been all over this country, and in my view, the young people of this country, your generation, is the most progressive generation in the history of America. You are leading this country in the fight against racism.
Against that.
In the fight against sexism.
Against that right there. That right there.
In the fight against homophobia.
That right there.
And in the fight against religious bigotry.
That right there. Straight up.
You understand, not just for yourselves, but for your kids and your grandchildren, that climate change has got to be combated, and we need to move to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. You know that. But all of your views and what you believe doesn't mean anything unless you get involved in the political process. So what we have now is a situation in Washington in where you have Trump and his Republican friends prepared to give a... Really? Do you really want to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. That's what you want. Hey, put it back over.
Do you really want to throw 32 million Americans off the health care that they have?
This fucking too bad.
Brothers and sisters, our agenda is a little bit different. Unlike Republicans who haven't raised the minimum wage in this state for 10 years, we're going to fight to raise that living wage $15 an hour. Wage fairness, we're going to do away with the absurdity of women making 80 cents on the dollar. And when we talk about women's rights, we know that it's not the government who's going to control a woman's body, it is the women themselves. And while we're here on this great campus, we say loudly and proudly that we are going to make public colleges and universities.
Yeah. Like you've ever read the entire Constitution. Give me a fucking break.
And we are going to substantially lower student debt, which is such a...
The dude in the suit? Was talking shit to the YDS?
Well, okay, so
and when
at
people
first he was like
tell
them,
us
and then
we
the
can't
Trump supporters were like, oh, well, the
afford
YDS
to do
is
that,
over there, and he's
well,
like,
we say that if Trump can give a $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%, you're damn well sure we can make public colleges and universities free. And unlike Trump and his friends and Dean Heller, we're not going to throw millions off the health care they have. We're going to move toward a Medicare for all, program, and guarantee health care for all people.
Damn right.
I want to give you some very good news. A few years ago, when I was on this campus, and I talked about the need to guarantee health care to all people, and I talked about Medicare for all, it was seen as a radical idea, an extreme idea. A poll just came out the other day. 70% of the American people now support Medicare for all. Brothers and sisters, we know, now I speak only for myself here, but we know that we have a criminal justice system which is broken and which is racist.
That's right.
And we know that the war on drugs, that so-called war on drugs, has been a disaster for millions of people.
That's right.
And I'm proud that in my state and many other states around this country, there is a strong movement to either legalize marijuana or decriminalize marijuana. Now, I disagree with Trump on virtually every issue. I'm pretty proud of that. I don't think you give tax breaks to billionaires. I think you ask them to start paying their fair share of taxes.
Damn right.
I don't believe you cut education or nutrition programs. I think you adequately fund them. But there is one issue where my differences with Trump go even deeper than healthcare or economics or the environment. Historically in this country, when we have had a president, that president has understood that one of the most important things that he could do is to bring our people together. Bring people together. Not divide people up. And now, for the first time in the modern history of America, we have a president who wants us to hate somebody because they come from another country.
It's fascism!
Wants us to be afraid of somebody because they come from another country.
It's fascist scapegoating!
We have a president who wants to divide us up based on the color of our skin, based on our sexual orientation, based on our religion. Now, all of you know that in the history of our great country, we have had a number of problems. And one of those problems is the issue of discrimination, going way back from when the settlers came to the shores of America and the terrible things they did to the Native American people.
That's right.
We know about the abomination of slavery and segregation. We know that 100 years ago, women in America didn't even have the right to vote. let alone go to a school like this, let alone get the job they wanted. We know that our gay brothers and sisters had to suppress their sexuality. We know that there was religious bigotry against Catholics, against Asians, against Jews, Italians, Irish. We know that. But we also know something else, that throughout the history of this great country, good people put their lives on the line to stand up to racism and sexism and homophobia. And our message to Donald Trump is that after all of those struggles against segregation and racism and discrimination, Mr. Trump, we are not going backwards, we are going forward. And our job is to bring our people together, men and women, black and white and Latino and Native Americans and Asian Americans. Our job is to bring our people together to create a government that works for all of us. Healthcare is a human right. Education is a human right. Drinking clean water and breathing clean air is a human right. So brothers and sisters, stand up, fight back, vote, bring your friends out to vote. Let's elect Jackie Rosen as the next senator of the state.
Okay, so that was what I think was a really fantastic speech, and I got to have a little fun talking some smack to some fascists, and which I'll give you a little more backstory on that in just a moment. But you know, I've said it in more than one of our past videos that this blue wave that Democrats and progressive are anticipating so much will come, provided they run on issues and don't make Donald Trump the sort of singular thing that they run against. And I think they're doing it right. That's what I saw, and you know, and you only saw the our local, and then you saw the speech from Bernie, but you know, I didn't provide the Rosen speech, and there were speeches by other local politicians, and I didn't provide that, but they all kind of were saying the same thing. It was a lot of talking about like universal health care, and talking about education, and talking about the rights of oppressed and marginalized people, and tempering it with a healthy dose of to Trump, which is good and important, because you need to, you know, create that stark difference between what you're doing and what that scumbag is doing. But you just can't make it the primary thing that you run on, and so I think this blue wave is coming. Now, what these Democrats and progressive do once they've surfed this wave into Washington is open for a lot of discussion, and that discussion will be had in the video. But I feel pretty confident in this blue wave thing, as long as people, and I think it's important, and it will be good, because like I said, and you saw my little quote in the Gazette Journal, was that, you know, at the very least, Rosen will fight or at least slow this horrible agenda that the Trump administration is on, and I believe it. How, to what degree and to what extent is, you know, again, another thing that's open for discussion. But, you know, but I said I would give you some backstory on that dude. So I walk up, and I'm just kind of cruising around looking for essentially a good spot to kind of stop and get Bernie's speech on film, and I see this journalist writing down notes and talking to this guy, so I kind of, you know, creep up and just kind of listen. And the guy's talking about, you know, I'm, you know, not Republican, I'm conservative on this, and economically I'm that, and socially I'm this and that and the other thing, you know, like fascists always do. And, you know, I could see that journalist writing away, and he's just like, you're trying to keep up with this long list of things that this guy is claiming is his political position. And so I just kind of leaned into the journalist, and I'm like, you know, he's a fascist, bro. And the journalist laughed, and like, and the guy just kind of looked at me like, he had no response to that. He just kind of smiled, and I don't think he'd ever been called a fascist before. But then the journalist wanted to talk to me. So I began explaining to him, well, right, the guy's basically claiming he's a libertarian. What he doesn't know is that the Libertarian Party was just, it was basically a manifestation of the Mises Institute and Murray Rothbard, who took the term libertarian from anarcho-socialists and infused it with this hyper pro-capitalist thing, which is actually the complete, like, contrary or antithesis of true libertarian socialism or anarchism. And it's fascism. It's fascism repackaged under, you know, my people's name. And so I'm explaining all that to the guy, and he's kind of getting it, and then Bernie started. So I was like, hey, I want to hear Bernie, and stop filming. And then later in the Rosen speech, you know, I had that little exchange where the guy was, you know, they're all the same, which is, that's anti-politics. To say the Republicans and the Democrats are all the same thing, you know, they're all sold out for the most part to a lot of the same people, but to call them the same is just not accurate. The Republican Party, as, you know, Noam Chomsky is like to say, is what? The worst, is the most dangerous group of people on the planet. They are the greatest threat to life on Earth. And I agree with I agree with Noam on that assessment completely. And it's completely given away to fascist exploitation of divisions in our communities and already deeply entrenched bigotry among the most ignorant, and resentment for, you know, the lie about the American dream not panning out for people, you know, all of this stuff. And so I'm going to return to a lot of this stuff when we get into the Malatesta section, okay? But there was one thing that Bernie said that I wanted to kind of take pause on and dive into a little bit, which is that he said that this is the most progressive generation in American history. And I think he might be right. I talk a lot on our show about how much confidence I have in millennials and this upcoming generation, and I stand by that. And whether they're the most progressive, I think they really potentially have the real potential to be the leftist generation in American history, and I would prefer that over progressivism personally. But I want to remind people of a time when we had a pro-revolution, pro-socialist vice president in office, who was even, I would argue, to the left of Bernie. And I'm talking about Henry Wallace. Now, I've done a complete video on him that really talks a lot more about really a lot of the correlations between what went down with the Democratic Party establishment and pushing out Henry Wallace, and how similar that was to what the DNC did during the election with Hillary and Bernie and all this. So I would suggest people watch that. It's Henry Wallace, Pro-Revolution, Socialist VP. But I want to show you a speech. It's made the rounds. Many of you may have seen it, but this is a speech by Henry Wallace. And if this generation isn't the most leftist in American history, maybe if some of you hear something from a past vice president, it might inspire you to actually be so. So check out him.
One fine morning, I woke up early. Bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao. One fine morning, I woke up early to find the fascists at my door.
The March of Freedom of the past 150 years has been a long, drawn-out people's revolution. This great revolution of the people, there were the American Revolution of 1775, the French Revolution of 1792, the Latin American revolutions of the Bolivarian era, the German Revolution of 1848, the Russian Revolution of 1918. Each spoke for the common man in terms of blood on the battlefield. Some went to excess, but the significant thing is that the people groped their way to the light. The people are on the march toward even fuller freedom than the most fortunate peoples of the earth have hitherto enjoyed. No Nazi counter-revolution will stop it. The common man will smoke the Hitler stooges out into the open in the United States, in Latin America, and in India. He will destroy their influence. No Lavals, no Mussolinis will be tolerated in a free world. The people, in their millennial and revolutionary march toward manifesting here on earth the dignity that is in every human soul, hold as their credo the 4 freedoms enunciated by President Roosevelt. We who live in the United States may think there is nothing very revolutionary about freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and freedom from the fear of secret police. But when we begin to think about the significance of freedom from want for the average man, then we know that the revolution of the past 150 years has not been completed, either here in the United States or in any other nation in the world. We know that this revolution cannot stop until freedom from want has been attained. And now, as we go forward toward realizing the 4 freedoms of this people's revolution, I would like to talk about 4 duties. It is my belief that every freedom, every right, every privilege has its price, its corresponding duty, without which it cannot be enjoyed. There must be neither military nor economic imperialism. Some have spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering, the century which will come out of this war, can be and must be the century of the common man.
Una mattina mi sono svegliato, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Una mattina mi sono svegliato e ho trovato l'invasor. Oh partigiano, portami via, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Partigiano, portami via, che mi sento di morire. E se io muoio da partigiano, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E se io muoio da partigiano, tu mi devi seppellire e seppellire lassù in montagna. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E seppellire lassù in montagna, sotto l'ombra di un bel fior. E tutti quelli che passeranno, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E tutti quelli che passeranno mi diranno che bel fior. E questo è il fiore del partigiano. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E
I roll if you can hear me out there. In the tradition of the MC5, please welcome the real kids.
Okay, so it's reading time with Reverend Aaron. And I have here Volume 3 of the complete works of Errico Malatesta. So, for those not familiar with who Errico is, Errico Malatesta, 1853 to 1932, is a principal figure of Italian and international anarchism. His 60-year militancy, much of it spent in exile or in prison, stretched from the foundation of the anarchist movement in 1872 to just before the Spanish Revolution. He has written bestsellers of anarchist literature such as Between Peasants, Anarchy, and At the Cafe. However, his evolving anarchism, pragmatic, theoretically coherent, and as relevant today as it was a century ago, is best illustrated by the myriad of articles scattered in the anarchist press and collected for the first time in these completed works. Now, one of the things that this is honest shit, one of the things I like to do when I go get involved in some type of electoral politics event or is I come home and I read from Malatesta to keep my shit in check and to keep things in proper perspective. Now, one of the things that's really fantastic about this volume is the first section is a collection of various essays and stuff called Anarchism and Parliamentarism. And the essay I'm going to read is called Anarchy and Parliamentarism. Now, just to be clear, it's only like barely over 2.5 pages, and I'll play some music, so it won't be some boring-ass audio book thing. But, yeah, let's get into some Errico Malatesta. The Italian Socialist Party's Election Manifesto. Translation from Il Manifesto Elettorale del Partito Socialista Italiano. L'agitazione Ancana 1, number 2. Volume 1, number 2, March 21st, 1897. The Italian Socialist Party, called by others the Milan Party, has issued its summons to the quote-unquote Battle of the Ballot Boxes. It states that it is taking to the field to defend popular freedoms, to demand respect for the law, seek, to win the most pressing forms of justice that are the pledge and condition of its ideal's advent, unquote, that ideal is unlikely to be achieved through muddled riots by a populace starved and brutalized by a life of slavery, and that consequently, even as it calls for organization and the conquest of the public powers by the proletariat, it offers, in its minimum program, a series of graduated reforms designed primarily to improve its living conditions. And it demands a withdrawal from Africa, and cut in military spending, statutory freedoms, universal suffrage, tax reform, and a range of social legislation. Which is fine. But we wonder why they do not describe themselves simply as Republicans, or indeed as His Majesty's opposition. Maybe it is because of that theoretical claim that collective property is the natural and necessary outcome of modern economic trends. Well then, so long as it is a matter of faraway theories and desires, any good property owner and any police officer could claim to be socialist readily enough, just as long as they are left to suit themselves. Or maybe it has to do with that conquest of public powers on the part of the proletariat, but that is nothing more than so-called popular sovereignty. And who is not in favor of the sovereign people these days? The point is that the real sovereigns are the ones who stand on the people's backs. All the reforms that, according to these socialists, the voters must demand through the ballot box also figure in more or less radical bourgeois programs. and have already been implemented in several countries, without making any difference in terms of weakening capitalism or bettering the people's conditions. It is worth launching a new party and styling ourselves scientific socialists, only to stoop to the level of bourgeois democrats? Certainly, even without straying outside the bourgeois system, many improvements are possible. And in fact, between the proletariats of various countries, there are very wide disparities in moral and material circumstances. We are indeed interested in people's circumstances being improved to the greatest possible extent, starting today, both by the immediate impact of reduced suffering and because when one is better nourished, has greater freedom, and is better educated, one has a greater determination and more strength to fully emancipate oneself. But a change in the people's circumstances is not dependent, and socialists should know this, on the freedoms inscribed in statutes or in the manner in which the state levies its taxes. The difference lies in the degree of consciousness to which the people have been raised, the measure of oppression they are prepared to endure, and the extent of the resistance they put up against the ruling class's extortions. Let me have a docile, disunited, frightened people, and they will be ground into the worst poverty and slavishness, no matter what the law may be. Let me have a people demanding a humane existence, and they will be treated humanely. And if, in order to do away with those afflictions that the people are no longer prepared to put up with, it takes liberal laws, those laws will be passed by the bourgeois themselves, lest the people get used to doing without laws. The point, therefore, is to teach the people what their rights are, to organize them and school them in resistance, and that, rather than chasing after the mirage of laws, ought to be what any socialist party deserving of the name is about. Moreover, the voting socialists do not vote in the hope of winning, neither in these nor in many elections to come. The object, they say, is to make a statement, in which case, why not state their program in its entirety? True, to listen to the Piedmont Regional Committee, one would think that they believe they are on the brink of becoming ministers. In this election, these good folk propose to campaign only for a withdrawal from Africa and on behalf of universal suffrage on the grounds that, quote, it would be impossible in any case to push the whole program through in one parliament. Imagine. God, I love Malatesta. But let us scrutinize the demands of the Milanese socialists somewhat more closely. Cutting military expenditure because attempts to make savings are ineffective unless applied to the military structure. This sounds like dearly departed Minister Sella. Among the many arguments against militarism, the socialists have now picked out the one about savings, which means absolutely nothing to the proletarians. If it were merely a matter of expenditure, militarism, given current social conditions, might be almost a blessing. Send some of the soldiery home, cut back on the staffing of the arms factories, naval dockyards, and military supply manufacturers, and there will be many more unemployed people to compete for jobs and to force down wages. Or do these socialists not understand that, under the capitalist system, the workers could not care less if their work is useful or useless? The essential point is that they have jobs. Universal suffrage. The socialists know that, underlying the present society, there is the class struggle, and they want, or should want anyway, the proletarians to become conscious of the antagonism that exists between their interests and those of the bourgeoisie. What better way of highlighting that antagonism than being able to state that the laws, all of them directed against the people, are made by masters? Why give encouragement to the people's illusion that they are the makers of the laws and that they can amend them? Universal suffrage is the best means of deception for those who crave, quote-unquote, harmony and concord between the social classes. But it makes no sense that today it is being called for by socialists, albeit authoritarian, parliamentarian socialists. Progressive taxation. So what has become of the celebrated theories of the iron law of wages and the repercussions of taxes, which were once upon a time among the Marxist school's mainstays? Lo and behold, from the fatalism and oversimplification of old, they have fallen into the most anodyne expediencies of bourgeois reformism. Is Giolitti, by any chance, a member of the party? One final observation. The parliamentary socialists are forever repeating that their deputies cannot turn traitor because they are subject to the party's discipline and more executors of the will of the party, but are all proletarian voter members of their party. The party lets in or expels whoever it wants, issues watchwords for every occasion, given its endorsement, or issues its condemnation. And we have nothing to say about that, since everyone is free not to join the party or to leave as he or she sees fit. But if there is the slightest glimmer of truth in representation, so-called, the deputies should obey their voters and not the party. Or is it a matter of offering a foretaste of the famed dictatorship of the proletariat, which would then prove to be the dictatorship of party over people, and of a handful of men over party? Poor socialism. Okay, look, I started the video by showing you a whole list of just horrific atrocities committed by Trump followers. We had a anti-Semitic racist white man murder 11 people in a synagogue. We had some Republican who was recently running for Republican office try to attain chemicals to murder somebody. Some other white racist, white nationalist guy tried to murder a bunch of people in a black church and couldn't, so murdered 2 others. You had a person who was apolitical before Trump, but was completely activated by him, who sent pipe bombs to, I believe it's 14 different people now. All people that Trump himself has regularly demonized in the midst of his rhetoric that calls for violence on a regular basis. And then in the midst of all of this man comes out and declares himself a nationalist. This has real-time effects on the minds of his followers. Fox News is regularly talking about how the pipe bombings, were any number of things other than what they were, which is a person weaponized and activated by the violent fascist rhetoric of the current administration and its acolytes in Congress. And like I said, it has a real-time effect on people. All those, maganoids that were up in the parking garage that you saw during the Bernie speech. Word is from a comrade of mine, who now has a Punch of Progress button. Sorry it takes so long. That Grace Hayes, the amazing singer that was performing opening for the Bernie speech that you saw video of, who later was kicking it with the YDS cats, that those maganoids were calling her the N-word and shit. Because politics, because, Trump, and, So, this is a beyond toxic environment. This is an incredibly confrontational environment. This is people really earnestly fighting as best they can for the rights of all people around the world. And, you know, there's various, you know, opinions on how that should be, you know, confronted and dealt with, whether you're a democratic socialist or a social democrat or a socialist or an anarchist or just a liberal or whatever. But all these people recognize that there is a very serious existential violent threat of fascism right now. Some people are a little hesitant to use that word, but whatever. They know that this threat is real and it's here. And something needs to be done about it. And, you know, socialists of all stripes, you know, we yearn for the revolution. We yearn for the end of capitalism. And I don't perceive that happening in the next election cycle or the one after it or probably the one after that, you know, depending on what happens, of course. You know, horrific things could happen that could truly activate people. I don't know. Which is a nightmarish thought. But the point being, I don't see any type of, you know, true revolution coming. And listen, if you have any notions that you can spur or spark this revolution by, I don't know, arming with your friends and, you know, committing some type of act to make it happen, like from some delusional so-called left perspective, I've got very serious news for you. It's been tried before, and it was a monumental disaster. Please see our three-part series. Well, it's not our series, but I reposted a three-part series called No Gods, No Masters, A History of Anarchism. It's amazing, and it gets all into the propaganda of the deed, which is essentially using violent and tactics to try to foment revolution. And it was a huge failure, and it backfired on anarchists for generations. So please, and the bottom line is, at this point, if any type of leftist tried to organize some type of armed, violent revolution, it would be instantly stamped down and become the poster child to solidify and validate this ongoing narrative from the right of the violent left. And all leftist organizing communities, whether it's BLM or just regular progressive liberal groups, would become under immense scrutiny and oppression from the state. So that's not going to happen. And no matter, well, that could happen, but it would not result in the revolution that we want. So what are we going to do, right? And this is my dilemma. And I'm, you know, as much as I don't want to perpetuate and bolster this form of representative democracy as opposed to direct democracy and anarcho-syndicalism and organizing in affinity groups and on the premise of solidarity, etc., etc. So we have to do something. And so obviously my notion is to go out and be involved in the political process as best I can and maybe agitate a little bit there and educate people a little bit. So, and of course, as you can see, you know, Malatesta was very critical of being involved in that. And I think what I took from that essay is, you know, for one, he is talking about a very specific group of socialists who had completely and singularly devoted themselves to this tactic of parliamentarism. And I agree with him that that is a completely wrong way to go about it. I am under the impression and of the of school of thought of that there is an incredible importance to diversity of tactics, okay? But once you completely focus yourself on the electoral process, you're no longer employing diversity of tactic, you're employing one tactic. And also, I do believe that the understanding of socialists being involved in a political process has evolved, and people have critiqued our past experiences with this type of activity. And I think that there are people who have taken some of the advice that Malatesta gave, almost kind of snarkily in that essay, when he said that, you know, why not just put the whole program up front rather than this incremental, okay, we'll just kind of sneak in this socialist idea and that socialist idea. Why not just be right up front and straight with this is our entire our entire legitimate, real platform. And I think that that is an incredibly good critique. One, if you're only sneaking it in, then it can buy into this narrative that the socialists are trying to sneak their communist agenda in on you. Don't make it sneaky. Be upfront. If it's communist, if it's socialist, if it's anarchist, just tell them. I can give you a great example of someone who's doing this, which is our comrade James Errico. He's running for Senate in Tennessee completely, openly, and unabashedly on a anarchist and anti-fascist platform. So we did a full interview with him on our channel. If you want to look for it, it's an interview with J.M. Errico, J-A-E, second word E-M, third word Errico, C-A-R-I-C-O. Check that out. It's pretty awesome. But so again, let me give you an example of something that I did that I don't know if it has any real effect or if it, anything really became of it. But here's what happens when someone who's read a lot of socialism goes to a progressive Bernie rally. So I'm standing there, and this kid comes up, and he wants to sign me up for something. I said, okay, what's this? And he wanted to sign people up for the Democratic Party and to register to vote. And, I basically, in a nutshell, told him, I'm not personally, I said, I'm an anarcho-socialist. I'm not personally on board with our current form of representative democracy. I said, but I think what you're doing is amazing. You're engaging in the process. You're out, you're talking to people, and you're learning. And I said, eventually, you'll get around to reading a little more Marx, and then you'll realize that liberalism isn't as good as Marxism. And then he goes, well, hey, basically, I do, technically consider myself a socialist. So I said, oh yeah. I said, well, do you know that there's a DSA in Reno, and we have a YDSA right here in on campus? And he just kind of looked at me glassy-eyed. It was obvious he didn't know what DSA and YDS was. So I said, Democratic Socialists of America. And then I said, and there's a young Democratic Socialist here on campus. And I said, you familiar with these groups at all? And he was like, no. I said, well, would you be interested in learning about them? Maybe signing up or going to a meeting? He said, well, sure. And I said, okay, well, hold on a second. So I went and grabbed a comrade who's a member of the local DSA. And I said, hey, there's this guy over here who's trying to get people to register to vote, and he's curious about the DSA. You want to go have a chat with them? I said, sure. So I walked them over, and they had their talk, and I walked away. So I don't know what became of it. I don't know if he signed them up. And I'm not trying to, lure people away from registering people to vote, because, go do that. Go out and talk to people. But, there's other things that you can get involved in as well. Diversity of tactics, right? So, yeah, because, look, everyone starts out somewhere. I was a dude who voted for, my first election was Bill Clinton. Voted for that scumbag twice. Now here I am, stumbling my way through trying to cram anarchism and Malatesta down people's throats, right? So, look, this is the bottom line. Leftism is a perpetual progression in learning based on ongoing study and analysis. Capitalism and its violent defense mechanism, fascism, simply ebbs and flows in reactionary response to contemporary social climates. Socialists applying a proper Marxist critique to that process will be better adept at anticipating and mindfully confronting its increasingly violent and oppressive existential symptoms.
And just because he's human, a man would like a little bite to eat. He wants no bull and a lot of talk that gives no bread and meat.
So left 2, 3, so left 2, 3, to the work that we must do. March on in the Workers' United Front, for you are a worker too. And just because he's human, he doesn't like a pistol to his head. He wants no servant under him and no boss overhead. So left 2, 3, so left 2, 3, to the work that we we must do. March on in the Workers' United Front, for you are a worker too. And just because he's a worker, his job is all his own. The liberation of the working class is the job for the worker alone. So left 2, 3, so left 2, 3, to the work that we must do. March on in the Workers' United Front, for you